And I do believe that these opportunities are there to be seized when we can go back to museums. Actually, in Italy, you can start today to go back to museums, of course, in a more controlled, if I may say so, way. So I'm really looking forward to listening to our panelists. And without further ado, I will give the floor back to you, Nicol. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. I'd like to turn to the panel now and ask them how they have been dealing with the lockdown, with this unprecedented situation. Starting, if I may, with Gabriele Finaldi, Director of the National Gallery. I wanted to ask you, as the Ambassador mentioned, the Titian Love, Desire and Death exhibition had literally just opened. And of course, you were not able to open the big exhibition of the year, the Artemisia Gentileschi. So you've been hit very hard by the lockdown. But you've strengthened your presence and your activities online with great success here. So I wanted to ask you what you have been doing. Thank you. You're muted.
Still haven't quite worked it all out. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you, Ambassador, for inviting me, and hello to the panelists and all the guests listening in. So yes, we closed the gallery on the 18th of March. It was a very sad occasion, but we quickly needed to find a way to maintain our profile, maintain our presence. People are very interested in what the National Gallery is up to, even when we're closed. For example, our virtual tour increased massively during the time of closure, but we quickly realized that we were, in effect, no longer a physical gallery. We'd become an online gallery, so everyone's interaction with the gallery and our own with the public was going to be purely digital. So we boosted the program. We created some new formats to work with families, to have some curators speak from home on a selection of pictures, to use some archive material from the gallery and simply maintain contact with frequent visitors, but also to be sure that those who were coming for the first time online would find a sufficient amount of content. And the whole point is to maintain contact, to express what it is the gallery is about, and to encourage people to come back when the time comes. It has been amazing. It's been an amazing period. I mean, if you think that for nearly 2 months, pretty much every museum in the world has been shut. It's an extraordinary, unprecedented situation. We've all been working very hard to maintain a presence, but above all, to maintain contact with the public and our visitors. This is what our museums are all about: sharing the art, sharing the collections with our publics.
Also been hit very hard. I think it's a matter of days. The Raffaele exhibition that you curated had to close down. I really like your definition of the exhibition as a mostra dormiente, kind of sleeping beauty. So I wanted to ask you as well what you have been doing to cope with the lockdown.
Thank you for inviting me. Good morning, everybody. And please first tell me if you can hear me.
Yes. Okay.
Well, I mean, we are today at the first day of the unlock in Italy, so it's quite a big emotion for us, although we are not yet open to the public. As you may know, we had to open the exhibition on March the 5th, and we had to close it on Sunday, March the 8th. It means that we have been open 3 days only. And there have been 3 hectic days because, of course, we had a huge pressure of the audience willing to have information and to get in, of course, but already some distance measure to respect. And it was very difficult because at that time, nobody has the feeling of how important it was. So it was also very hard for us to make the rules respected. And that Sunday, I remember very well that day, it was traumatic, and it was all very sudden. We had during the night the decree from the government to close, And so we had lots of people who had, of course, already paid their tickets, and we had to say no, but everything was closed. We had not at all any indication about the length of this measure, but it became clear in a few hours that it was not going to be short at all. And so we had to face at first the theme of safety and security, because we had, an immense value. We were keeping an immense value. I'd rather prefer not to pronounce the total amount of the insurance value because it has a very frightening impact on me also at this stage. And so we wanted to make sure also that everything was okay. In the same time, the city were becoming desert, and so everything was really absurd. But we had in our heart and in mind to make the conditions, to build the conditions for a reopening, if any. So we decided, since we have a lot of graphic materials, drawings, and not only also books, and we tried to make the condition of light exposure to zero, to bring them to zero. So we darkened the show. We covered everything with black fabric, so to persuade when was the time the lenders that all the works on paper had no exposure to light at all. And this is why, of course, we had such a general response to authorize the extension of the loan, which will be, it's not yet official, but in very few days we will be opening again for a long period. And so this is why we decided to call it the Bella Dormiente, la Bella Addormentata, because it was a bit strange. Of course, when you close an exhibition, you switch off the light. But we did more. We covered it, so it was a sort of mourning atmosphere on Raphael, because everything was darkened and covered with black, and was also quite compatible with the insistence we made in the show to the death of Raphael, which is the reason of the anniversary. So in a way, it was a sort of new interpretation of the death of Raphael. But we are really anxious to bring some light in very soon.
Well, it's very good to hear that Sleeping Beauty will wake up. If I may turn now to Roberta Cremoncini, director of the Estorick Collection. Again, you had to close the Tullio Crali A Futurist Life exhibition, which has been a great success. But in a way, maybe it had a longer life because of the lockdown in a strange way. Obviously, the exhibition has gone online, but it's been extended beyond this due date because the exhibition that was due to open in April, of course, was not able to open. So, do you see any positives in this lockdown?
Well, obviously, first of all, thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Ambassador, for asking me to join. And obviously, it's a very strange time, and as Gabriele said, it was very sad the moment we had to decide to close the museum. And also I remember when we actually covered our drawings as well, as I'd like to make sure they would be fine during the time we are closed. So in a sense, that was a very traumatic thing to go through. But it's, and also we are a very small team. We are actually only 4 people, 5 people working. So it's actually everything to change pace was very demanding. But we tried to put lots of content online, and also we were lucky that Tullio Crali has been a very successful show, and the interest has continued. And also small things, they actually made a difference. For example, we still have our shop online still working, and we realized that lots of people were interested in buying lots of catalogs. So there's still a continuing amount of interest coming out. And also we did small films about the exhibition. In a sense, that made us realize that there is also life online, but for us the difficult thing is we are quite small. But on the other hand, is it will be there, the content will be there for longer, and also there is the interest that then our supporters, they sort of continues to be with us. I can't hear you.
The challenges you have had are slightly different. Obviously, the Institute had to close its doors, but it has carried on with a lot of online activities. You seem to be very keen to keep almost a daily link with people through your online presence. Can you tell us a bit more about it, please? Katia, you have to unmute.
You speak. Should I answer?
No, it was for Katia, but I think she cannot hear. You have to unmute. I can see she's still muted. No.
Nicol?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Shall I turn to Xavier Bray?
Yes.
Are you online now? Can you hear us? Xavier? Again, you're on mute. No. I can see Xavier Bray disappeared again. So maybe we can go back. We can open up the conversation to ask the panel. I mean, when museums open again in Italy today, in Germany they've already opened, they are going to look very different. How do you see them reopening? And obviously there'll be anything from plexiglass shields to markings on the floor to masks and so on. Do you think there will still be the places we all know and love? Could I start with Gabriele Finaldi?
So it will be a curious experience, I guess, in the first instance to go back to museums. Museums are places of communal interaction, and they're places of conversation. They're places that I guess most people visit together rather than alone. So a socially distanced museum, and it's not just the practicalities of social distancing. I think we're all aware that whenever we go into public places, we've suddenly become very concerned about being close to other people, whether it's directly for ourselves or for other people. So I suppose in the first instance, visiting museums recently reopened will be a curious, distanced experience. I also think that in the first instance also there'll be very few people visiting. In London, we have the big issue of how people will get into central London. Social distancing in the museums is fine, but if you haven't been able to social distance on public transport as you come in, it seems perhaps a little bit strange. However, I'm sure that there's a huge hunger out there to return to normal life, to come back to the museums, to see the exhibitions. And I think museums are a kind of indicator of normal life. They're also an indicator of those things that we consider to be most valuable in our society. So I'm very confident that people will return gingerly in the first in the first few weeks and so on. But I think gradually, as confidence builds up and people see that the social distancing measures are being respected, it's safe or it's perceived to be safe to go into the centre of town and visit these institutions, our visitors will return. It'll be very interesting to see what happens with schools. It'll also be very interesting to see, how soon visiting museums will become kind of mass experience again. There's been a lot of debate in recent times about, what's the best way to see works of art, what's the best way to see exhibitions, a lot of concern about, mass visiting to the British Museum, to the Vatican museums and so on. It's a concern because the experience is often difficult, often uncomfortable, not especially pleasant. I suspect in the first few weeks, visiting museums will be fairly quiet. We're very keen, however, at the National Gallery for people to return, and we'll be looking to open as soon as we possibly can after the government date is met. That's the 4th of July here in Britain.
Could I ask you, because one of the great joys of living in London, for me anyway, is to be able to pop into the National Gallery whenever I'm passing by to just see a painting or two, if I don't have time for more. Presumably that will all go. You'll only have pre-booked visits because of the concerns.
Well, that's a good point. It's the requirements of social distancing, I think, will oblige us to create timed ticketing. It will be free, of course, timed ticketing of some description. We're working on that at the moment. But also, I was very keen that there'll be availability for walk-ups. So people who happen to be in the centre of town and want to visit the National Gallery will be able to come to the door and acquire a free ticket in order to visit. That's the way we're going to manage it to begin with. Visiting the gallery for free, it's the case of Xavier's museum at the Wallace Collection and so on, is very important for the London audience. These are museums and institutions that are deeply embedded in the experience of London citizens and of visitors. So that idea that you've described, Nicol, of just being able to wander in, spend 15 minutes in front of a painting by Velázquez or Titian or Giotto for that matter, it's a very important part of the kind of fabric of London life. So we're desperately keen to maintain it, and I hope that free time ticketing won't last very long.
Thank you. Could I welcome Xavier Bray? I hope you can hear us now.
I can. All my apologies. I had trouble getting in. I could hear you all, but I couldn't participate. But I did it. Thank you for inviting me.
We're very happy that you joined us. So the Wallace Collection obviously also had to close its doors and has launched an online initiative, Wallace from Home. So can you tell us a little bit about how you dealt with the lockdown?
Yes, I mean, it was a tragic event for all of us and Gabriele and all our museums. We were doing incredibly well at the Wallace. We had a very successful exhibition. People were coming in, they were eating their food at the restaurant, buying books and all kinds of things. And suddenly we had to close and it went completely quiet. And thank God we've got a great communications team, great curators, conservators, education, and we all got together to provide some kind of online presence. But now we're really starting to think of how we're going to reopen. We're very keen, like Gabriele is, to play a role. I think museums are like the litmus paper of recovery as such. I think once we can reopen our doors, it will show that people can start re-engaging with the great collections we have. I like to think positively that we've been on a cultural fast, a bit like Ramadan. We can't have access to the physical work of art, but the moment we are able to open our doors and we do it in the safest of ways and bring in the sort of confidence in the public, we're very much looking forward to installing a system that will allow people to come in slowly. The great thing about the Wallace Collection is that it is a house. Richard Wallace and his wife gave the whole collection to the nation in 1900. And we'll sort of have to work it as a house. We'll have an entrance, an exit. We'll tell people to go one way and come back the other way. So there will be some kind of curated itinerary. It might be frustrating for some who have, loved the idea of popping in and out, but they will have to bear with us. And I've noticed how people are very civilized when they queue at Tesco's and Waitrose. The same will have to apply to museums, at least for the next six months, until things hopefully come back to some kind of normality.
Are you looking at the 4th of July for reopening?
Well, as one of our colleagues in the museum world said, the 4th of July is not the D-Day landing. It's not the actual day we are all reopening, but we're definitely thinking that from the 4th of July onwards, we would like to find ways of reopening. The biggest sort of challenge really is to get our staff safely into London. People who live outside London, transport is going to be an issue. People will be nervous. But once we can come up with a system, maybe different opening hours, that's something that we are actively thinking about, and we'll definitely communicate to our other museum colleagues. Do we open a bit later to allow our staff to come in after the rush hour? Will there be a rush hour? I mean, there are big questions to answer in terms of practicality. But I would like to think that we could hopefully be reopened by mid-July. But again, we are all desperate for a date. to work with, to plan with, and things are keep changing. So we have to be very realistic about the possibility. The other thing I'm trying to tell my staff is that we can't reopen the whole museum, so we'll have to be very selective of what we show and allow the public to visit in order to make sure that we keep control and have a real sort of clear setup that is very clear to our visitors.
Thank you. Could I try to bring in Katia Pizzi again? Can you hear us now? And can you unmute so we can hear you? No, you're still muted.
Hear you now.
Yeah, now we can.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, welcome.
Good. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, the ambassador. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you for allowing me to be part of this very distinguished panel of heavyweights in the museums and art worlds. And thank you for allowing me to bring the perspective of the Italian Cultural Institute here in London, which of course is an exhibition space, but it's also a polyvalent cultural space. So it's not only an exhibition space, but it's also a language school, a library, and many more things. So the lockdown has really affected all of these functions of the Institute in very specific and individual ways. And I could really talk at some length to you about how the lockdown has affected each single one of these fields and of the strategies that we've had to put into place to mitigate the effects of the lockdown. For instance, I could talk to you about setting up rubrics or periodic or regular daily rubrics online, such as Stay Safe or Focus on Raffaele. However, since today's emphasis is on museums and art galleries, I would like to talk a little bit about the contribution of the Italian Cultural Institute in this particular area. So as an exhibition space, at the time of closure, the Institute were just about to return an externally curated exhibition of pietre sonore, which are musical stones, in the museum in Sardinia, where they are usually located. The musical stones were created by a Sardinian sculptor, Pinuccio Sciola, and they are evidence of the fundamental interaction between the visual and the performing arts. In fact, the stones are meaningful only insofar as they are touched and they are played by, like a musical instrument, by human hands. We ran this exhibition between January and early March, together with a full program of conferences, of talks, and performances. And we just about managed to accomplish the full program in time when the lockdown occurred. The stones are currently still sitting in our exhibition space, presenting a logistical problem, like any other museum and art gallery out there. The stones now are silent. They are dead. Without a public and without players, the stones are meaningless. They lose their meaning. So this was leading me to a reflection. I don't know if I'm allowed some time to have a reflection about the social value of culture, the social value of art, because social distancing for us has also meant cultural distancing. And that's the challenge. That's what we miss right now, is the idea that art has to be experienced and lived in close by. And of course, I'm not just talking about the conviviality that follows a cultural event, the gathering together over food and drink, which is also important, of course. But I'm talking about the touch, the hearing, the visual, the mood, the color of a work of art. And we are really missing all these qualities of the work of art right now, the lived qualities of art. So it's going to take a huge effort of imagination collectively to overcome this loss of presence. So how to remedy the loss of presence? Well, overwhelmingly, museums and art galleries, their overall strategy has been to moving content online or creating new content online. So the website has become the museum, and conversely, the museum has become the website. So we're frequently reminded of the opportunities of going digital. However, I remain a little bit on guard with respect to the seduction of the digital. In fact, I think, first of all, putting content online, it's a little bit like translating. You know, in transfer from one language to another, something is lost. Something is lost in translation. The other point I'd like to make about putting things online is that the digital medium flattens time. The great art historian Abi Warburg talks about Denkraum, that is to say, the necessary space of reflection and contemplation with which we should be able to approach a work of art. Now, our Denkraum is compressed, is flattened by the digital medium. So what I'm trying to suggest is that it's precisely the connotative dimension of art that is lost, the suggestive, the poetic, the mysterious qualities of the work of art. The work of art is deprived of its aura, of its intrinsic ability to move and to inspire. Everything becomes a bit flat, including our relationship with the art world. So to come to a short conclusion, are there any positives in this time of crisis? What can we take out of this crisis? Yes, I think there are some positives. There are, of course, the conversations, there are the dialogues to be had at this time. And personally, I'm finding this time extremely productive in terms of creating new networks, making new friends, and seeking new partners at the international and European level. This has become key at this time of social isolation. So I'm having intense interactions, not only with my colleagues and other directors of Italian cultural institutes worldwide, but also, for instance, with my counterparts at the Goethe Institute, the Institut Français, and Instituto Cervantes. So I believe these encounters are building a genuine and novel sense of community, not merely with a view to exchanging initiatives and sharing ideas, but primarily to forging new and hopefully long-lasting connections that will thrive well beyond the end of the current emergency.
Thank you very much, Katia.
Thank you, Nicol.
Looking ahead on a sort of a positive note to the future, if I could turn now to Matteo Lafranconi, please. We have heard from Xavier, Bray and Gabriele Finaldi about how they're planning to reopen. How are you planning to reopen the Raffaele exhibition?
We are very anxious to verify what will be the result of this experiment, of course. The main measure, of course, will be the social distancing. All the rest is common to everybody. And social distancing will be definitely a huge changement in the perception experience of visiting the show. It means that we worked a lot about that. Of course, I'm the only one running an exhibition space, so I want to underline it. I have only 3 months now to bet on the restart of the show, and of course we will be able to host much less people than you used to. More or less is perhaps a fifth of the total amount we were expecting in the best world. What we realized is it's a complicated system. It's a sort of militarized system, so not very pleasant, but at the same time with an exchange to the public. We try to give back to the audience a sort of more calm visit, and so we organize it in this way. We have only pre-booked entrance, of course, which is a big new. We have an exact timing for entering, and we will be organizing small groups of around 6 people that will be welcomed by a guard, which will be a sort of a chaperone in a way, taking the group at the main entrance and bringing through the show until the very end. It's a sort of a companion guide. He will be not able to make a guided tour, but he will be responsible for the visit under the safety and whatever could happen to the group. And it will be happening each 5 minutes. So we divided the show in 18 sections, so to have to make a proportion for allowing, according to us, what will be good to be seen in 5 minutes. In total, the visit will be 80 minutes in total of the visit, so it's not short at all. And but is obliged. You cannot really. It's a sort of clockwork, and you cannot really decide yourself and administrate your visit. This will be the main loss emotionally. But of course, also in comparison with the first 3 days of opening, with lots of people, the people will be enjoying a more calm going through the room, and we hope that it's a sort of recompense that we will try, which is also have an impact on the number of visitors. So we renounce to a certain number of visitors to give in exchange a much longer visit, a much calm visit, and finger crossed, of course.
Thank you. So military discipline. And if I could turn to Roberta Cremoncini, because obviously when you're planning to reopen and how, because obviously the Estorick is an absolute jewel, but it does have quite small rooms. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, for us, we kind of have the same problem with being a house, which gives it much more intimate things. And we never have huge numbers, but it's one thing we are introducing is buying tickets online. So we're not going to have only a limited amount of people coming in. And also our biggest challenge was to rely heavily on volunteers, and so we will need to work with them how to manage and maybe to extend the opening hours, and how to find a way. Also the one-way system. There is the rooms are large, but the corridors aren't. So we will have to try to find a way. Also, it is very difficult for not allowing people to spend as much time in each room. That will be the challenge. And it's, as well as being the challenge of going online, when actually it's so important to have the relationship with the paintings. To see the paintings will never be replaced by the online experience. Lots of information can be online, and lots of ideas can be shared, and what we've been trying, but also the materiality of the painting is so important. Obviously, we are very intimate, so in a sense probably we will be even more intimate than we have been before, and try to make the best of actually making an experience that can be as pleasurable, maybe is much smaller groups, and the challenging would be the logistic of coming in. We are because we are small, in a sense we are very flexible, so we will be able to open fairly quickly. And the idea is we have been lucky that our program hasn't been cancelled, so we can actually just postpone, and the Tullio Crali will be open for a few weeks, definitely, when if it's from probably mid-July or something like that, probably until the end of August, if everything goes according to plan, even if they are very tentative. But also, and then we will have the exhibition from Mita, from the textile exhibition from Genoa in September. That's the hope and the plan. But we have been very fortunate that we could actually just postpone and extend the loans instead of having to cancel and waste all our energies on different things. So hopefully we'll have a small small groups coming in, and also we're fortunate that we're trying to find a way to use the garden that during the summer months could be a way to manage the visitors.
Thank you. And if I could ask on the subject of extending loans, there must have been quite a difficult negotiation for Director Lafranconi to extend the loans for the Raffaele.
That is a very interesting point. To say the truth and to be honest, it was really easy, and the solidarity and the support of all the lenders was incredible. In the first tour of informal contacts immediately, but also in a second time with the renovation of the contracts. It depends, of course, in the support given to such an extraordinary occasion, because of course it's the 5th centenary and nobody can forget this. but I also think that is something new, a new sense of community. Roberta was referring to that before, and I'm very much agree with this. I think that is something new that everybody is now feeling that the only way to get out together is to row in the same direction. And it's the first time ever we face the same problem at the same time. And so the art world is not really immune from rivalry. And in this case, I think really it's something that has been neutralized in a way. This is very encouraging. And I want to thank, for example, I have here one of the most generous lenders, so it's a symbol of this new attitude. And I want to thank Gabriele and everybody, because without this support, which is absolutely extraordinary, we will be able to extend the show for the same time duration we had in mind before. It means 3 months, which is really never happened. And this is something new. This is the first step of a new sense of community that I hope will remain or will be kept also in the future.
That's wonderful to hear. And Gabriele Finaldi, on the subject of extensions, will we be able to see the Artemisia Gentileschi at some point? You're muted.
Sorry. Most certainly you'll be able to see Artemisia. The exhibition space was completely prepared to welcome the loans coming in for that show. In fact, 2 of the loans had already come in, and it was literally just a few weeks before we were due to open that the lockdown happened. So we're all furiously rescheduling now across the whole world. And Matteo has made the point that there's a new solidarity. I think the only appropriate way to act at this point within the museum community and the artistic community is to be generous. There is no other appropriate way to act at the moment. So we're seeing that across the world, lenders being extremely understanding, all those requests for extensions being, I'd say, almost universally met and agreed to. So I think that's a very good thing within our sector, let's call it that. But also I think it's a very good thing for the visiting public too. So yes, Artemisia will open. We'll be announcing some dates for Artemisia a little bit later on. Clearly, just as we heard Matteo in his discussion of the Rome Raffaele show, you need to be confident that you have a core number of works that are still guaranteed to do an exhibition. Any exhibition organizer knows that this is absolutely necessary. So once you've got that confidence, then you can go ahead and announce when the new dates will be. We'll be doing that very shortly, but please rest assured, London and the world will be able to see the National Gallery's Artemisia exhibition in due course.
Thank you. Another thing I wanted to ask is there's been a debate recently, obviously with the pandemic, there's been a lot more focus on the environment, sustainability. Presumably people will travel less in the future. Do you think this is the end of sort of big blockbuster exhibitions that require, obviously works of art to travel sometimes for huge distances and a lot of logistics? Anyone who wants to pick this up?
Can I pick that up first of all? It's definitely an issue that museums are talking about a lot. Exhibitions are very expensive. There's a lot of works of art traveling across the world in aeroplanes. People have become very sensitive to what that means for the environment. It's an appropriate concern for our times. Of course, it's one of the primary concerns of our times. Personally, I think that the blockbuster exhibition, the big exhibition that kind of shows the entire range of an artist's work or a particular civilization or whatever it might be, I think are extremely valuable. They're very successful instruments to convey new scholarship, new understanding, to present these great historical figures or time periods to the public. So they are absolutely crucial. I think there'll be less of them. I think there'll be fewer institutions that will be able to do them. They are becoming increasingly expensive, but I definitely don't think they'll disappear. There is a big demand for them and they are very valuable in themselves.
Matteo Lafranconi?
I totally agree. I think that I believe that the crisis of the great major shows, I mean, blockbuster show began much before the pandemic. And so we have to be aware that something has to change, absolutely. Environment is a big issue, of course, but now there is something more. The concern of traveling is really big now, also for the couriers and for everybody, but for visitors only. So everything will be more expensive and less visited, perhaps. But I believe that we have not to renounce to the idea and to the project of some kind of complete exhibition to be proposed in.
Could I just
yes.
remind the audience that they can ask questions if they want? There's a function where they can write down a question. I shall try to ask on their behalf. Could I ask Xavier Bray as well about his thoughts about big blockbuster exhibitions going forward?
Yes, I mean, blockbusters are going to be difficult, mainly because you can't let people in as much as you could have done in the past, which means, of course, the economics behind doing a blockbuster will just not work. And what I think will probably happen is that there'll be a sort of reappreciation of the great collections that we have in our own countries. People will re-engage with the permanent collections and really sort of get to know them a bit better than they previously had done. But the other thing are just clever small exhibitions. So, for example, the National Gallery's exhibition, The Titian, the 6 Titians that have been brought together, is a wonderfully small but very powerful exhibition that has a lot of merit, and people will come. And I think we are all talking about, and we were already talking about it, about slow looking, the idea of taking time, the idea of contemplating. And I think we have all experienced that sort of monastic existence in the last few months. And, you know, just one object can carry so much importance. And indeed, an exhibition we're planning with the National Gallery is to reunite the 2 great landscapes by Rubens. We have one here, and the National Gallery has the other. They haven't been seen together for a good 200 years. And to see them together, just 2 pictures, 2 meters apart, social distancing between 2 pictures, but allowing them to communicate and allowing the public to enter the worlds of Rubens and his country house, which he painted in his old age, could be a total revelation, and perhaps as engaging and as satisfying as a big blockbuster might have been. So I think museums will have to really think hard about what they can do with their own collections and borrow, but in a very minimal way.
And when I wanted to ask again to whoever wants to answer about how you obviously all enhanced their online content, and going forward, there's a case to be made for, you know, people have got used to it, and more people will explore art online. Do you see at any point yourselves having to charge for online content?
That's a good question. It's also part of the debate at the moment because it's expensive to produce content online. We're always very conscious that the web is very voracious. It wants to consume a lot of content very quickly, and to produce it is not always straightforward. Also, I think one of the things that the pandemic has shown up is that a lot of our museums are simply not equipped to turn themselves into digital institutions from one moment to the next. No one expected that would be the case. But we've realized that digital is an important form of communication. And I think what we'll see in the future is digital being much more fully embedded in what museums offer, that there'll be a kind of, holistic, well-rounded offer, including, visiting on site and content for remote visitors. And those 2 things will work very, very closely together. Just going back to some of the things that Katia picked up in her very interesting observations. Digital doesn't replace the museum. After all, we we're art historians, we work with the objects themselves. We're very keen that we can share our enthusiasm for the objects. Katia mentioned that, you know, the images have become very flat. They've also become very small. And one of the things about going to a museum is, you know, you stand in front of a picture. It has a sort of physical relationship of scale with your body. It has relief. It has three-dimensionality. You're very conscious of this aura of that being the very object that the artist produced in their studio back in the 16th century or whatever it was. That's something that's not translatable, I think, to digital. I think digital can do different things, and we need to ensure that, you know, the two things are working together, and digital is kind of extending or enriching the experience that you can have in a museum.
And Xavier, Bray, do you see yourself ever in future charging for online content?
I think so far we are very keen to make it all admission free, both coming in, but also the website being on a sort of equal standing. What might happen perhaps is we were thinking of having online conferences, and you know, we normally charge for those. So why shouldn't you be able to charge for you know, to join in a bit like what we're doing now, a conference with great art historians speaking amongst each other, giving papers, with lectures online. And maybe, you know, you could charge a sort of nominal fee to join in and to be part of a very important conference and with papers. So there's that. But I think so far we really believe the website to be a great educational tool to really expand the knowledge, to communicate the knowledge we have. I think at the Wallace, we realized we didn't have that much content when we first started off. And it has been a matter of really trying to get the curators, conservators all together to provide that content in time. And the good thing is that it's now there, and we're going to increase it. But we very much depended on the visitor before coming in and listening to a lecture or to a talk in the galleries. And it was always very much a mouth-to-mouth kind of experience. I think with the website, there is a sense of consistency and almost sort of immortal sort of communication and content that can be used for a long time. And I would like that to remain free to all.
Yes, because one of the positives, surely, of the lockdown, not many, but is that it's bringing art online. It has made it a lot more democratic, you could say, a lot more accessible to everyone. It's put everyone on a level playing field, wherever they are and whoever they are. Do you see this? Obviously, this is a positive development. Do you see it as being permanent or transitory?
We're going to try and make it permanent. We're already thinking of finding, you know, patrons and people who might be interested in making our website all the more efficient and open to all. So it's something we're definitely going to invest in. And with, you know, social distancing in place, I think it's going to be hard to get as many people into the museum. So let's complement that with a website that allows you to hear the latest on the swing from one of our curators, or the latest from one of our curators about the cabinet maker Riesner, so that, you know, people can really get to grips with the collection from afar. And when they eventually make it to the Wallace, they have a lot of knowledge with them to get to know the objects even better.
Yes, Roberta.
I think is that obviously it is very important to have lots of content and also available content, but also will never replace the experience of coming into the museum. And I think that's has to be an encouragement. It is in a way, yes, open to many more people, but on the other hand, they don't really have the feeling of actually seeing the real work of art. And I think that is why museums are so great and is so special in that sense, because that there would be the same as a while ago to have things in color books, and now is the internet, and you got lots of materials. But I think if there is a scope for the content online, is just to get more information and to entice people to come and experience the real work of art inside the museum at some point.
Yes, Katia, you have to unmute. Unmute.
Thank you. Hello. Can you hear me now?
You can hear now.
Talking about the democratizing art, and it's a very, very valuable and important point. I was wondering if the directors of museums were prepared to test perhaps even radical ideas of bringing or lending parts of their collections not just to other museums, but perhaps to ordinary citizens or schools or to other institutions, such as the Italian Cultural Institute. So this has already been tried and tested in Leeds, in the Leeds Galleries lending scheme. And I was wondering if sort of perhaps new modalities of lending are being considered as part of the effect of this crisis.
Could I, they're getting a lot of questions coming in from our audience. Could I ask, let's asking one of them, the first, from Giulia Caverni. Thank you. My question is related to new acquisitions. How has the pandemic impacted the process of acquiring new works for your museums and institutions, keeping sustainability in mind? Thank you.
The mission of our museum, for example, is to continue acquiring works for the National Collection in order to open up new areas of understanding in the history of art, in order to illustrate aspects of European or European-related painting that were not so well before. So that's inscribed in our mission. So we will certainly continue to do that. I think it's becoming more difficult because works of, let's say, major museum quality are rarer. They've also become very, very expensive. But we will continue to do that. I'm not quite sure what the sustainability issue is. It may be related to funding for these works. But this is an important part of our activity, and we will continue to do it.
Thank you. Another question is, from Phil Cook, could the panelists speak a little bit more about how they've gone about enhancing their virtual museum dimension of their activities, and what difficulties have they encountered and overcome?
Well, probably I should start being the smallest museum here. Obviously, for us, it's been the most difficult thing wasn't the content, because we were quite prepared. We know our collection very well, and we actually have lots of material. The fact that actually is the technicality. We have one person dealing with all the social media, so it's been her job has changed completely, and I want to thank her publicly, because there's been non-stop and trying to not compete, but also to try to make our presence felt. Obviously, it is there are the large museum where they probably have many more people on the technical side, or the commercial galleries, they actually have much more power. So for a very small foundation like us, it's been extremely challenging, but also I think is in a way quite interesting to experiment, to do things in our kitchen or something like that. But it's been it is a learning curve as well, and we're getting better, but it's also hopefully will just be small ideas that will then entice people back into the museum.
Anyone else want to come in on that? Otherwise, I'll ask the next question.
I'll just say quickly, I mean, like Roberta, we have a very small team, and it was a real challenge. But with time, we managed to, for example, we had this wonderful exhibition on Indian painters for the East India Company. And in the end, we managed to get an online tour using the audio guide. So we recycled the audio guide, and we cleverly cut and paste the images with room shots. And it's been wonderfully popular. Anything that if there's any virtual tour that one can do using the space that we have through photographs or video, all the better. People seem to have the time in the evening to sit down and travel temporarily to our exhibitions or museums, and that's something that certainly we should definitely think of developing.
There's a question that's come in from a student, Mimi Rose. She says, I'm an art history student, and I wondered how this more limited and presumably more expensive attendance to museum or exhibitions will affect students and less wealthy visitors?
Well, the National Gallery is free, so the gallery will continue to be free. People sometimes mention blockbusters in a slightly disdainful tone. The National Gallery is indeed a blockbuster the whole time, and it's there for free for everyone to visit. So students and everyone will have the opportunity to do that. Eventually, I think the timed free ticketing, advanced booking arrangement will disappear. I hope it will. I hope it won't last very long. But the great British national institutions will be open for free. Exhibitions are a different matter because exhibitions are very expensive to put on. They require ticketing. I think museums are looking at inventive ways to ensure that the audiences can be very broad. We've seen some very interesting work done at Tate, for example, on creating a sort of youth sort of £5 membership that allows students to be able to visit all those exhibitions pretty much for free. And these are the kinds of things that we should be looking for, because we're very keen that our audiences should be constantly growing, not necessarily just growing in mass and number, but ensuring that that everyone, and particularly the younger visitors who are not so familiar with the tradition of exhibitions, perhaps, can become habitués of the galleries and the Kunsthalles.
One of the good things about London Museum, they've always had huge discounts and facilitations for students. So I guess that will continue. There's another question. Sorry, do you want to?
Very quickly, the Estorick collection, we do charge tickets, but the students are free, and they will always continue to come in free, at least for.
There's a question from Giulia Rancati. I've worked in Germany, where the local and national museums have started to explore new ways, new uses of digital to help communities to make sense of their world at this time of intense change and anxiety. Is anybody running similar programs in the UK that you know of?
I think every museum has found ways to connect with its communities, and if you look up and down the country, there's some very remarkable work being done up at Beamish. I think that Tate's doing some very interesting work in this regard. The idea that you can connect both with a local community, in other words, the people who live around your museum, but also you can connect much more broadly. And of course, our museums are places that don't just deal with kind of historical realities of the past. They try and find ways to connect with contemporary concerns, whether those are to do with health and well-being, whether they're to do with the environment. That we have to find ways constantly to connect with our communities and the wide range of those communities, because we truly believe that our collections have the ability to speak across time and place, and it's for us as curators or museum people to ensure that that kind of communication does happen.
One thing I certainly love about all your websites is the attention devoted to children and their interaction with art. You all have activities and special sections devoted to children. I think that surely that's a very good way, not only of obviously engaging children with art from an early age, but also to do activities with them at this time of lockdown. I wanted to, there are quite a few questions coming in on the same theme, which is the business model going forward. Clearly, an online presence for museum, however diverse, however successful, cannot make up for loss of income from either, obviously, no exhibitions during the lockdown, but even after, when, as you're always saying, there will be reduced numbers. So what is the business model going forward for museums and galleries?
I'll respond very briefly. It's a big question. We are a national institution, and the national institutions have the comfort of resting on the sort of bedrock of state finance. It's never enough, of course, and we've been required in the last 20 years to be very inventive to develop our own revenue-raising capabilities. And I'd say we've done it very effectively, not just in Britain, but as you look across Europe and elsewhere, museums have been very, very good at this. I think what's happened now is that we found that the model is fragile because all of a sudden, our tourist audience has largely disappeared. With the museum being closed, there is no revenue coming in from your shops and your restaurants and your event hire business and so on. So we realize that our business models are fragile and depend on a whole series of circumstances being in place, let's say. So I think there's some quite serious thought going on now as to whether the model that we've used, which has been in a sense kind of foisted on us, I suppose, back in the 1980s, whether that's really sustainable into the future. We'll be looking very closely at how other models work abroad and how those models change abroad and see if there are things that we can learn in this country.
I hear that in Germany they're talking about a 500 million euro museums emergency fund. Do you think there should be more government intervention, as there has been, of course, in other sectors of the economy? Matteo Lafranconi?
We raised a lot of themes. I wanted to say that I think that the main challenge for us, both exhibition and museums, is to face the new experience of the original work. When the online contents have been for everybody very successful and can bring lots of new audience and it's hugely democratic also. But we have now to face a new relation with the visitors in terms of original visit. I think this is the big challenge, and we have to perhaps start to separate a bit the category of tourism and the category of visiting museums and exhibition. Of course, there is many intersections. I think in the last 2 decades, it became almost the same thing. And this is something that is too fragile for the works, for the organization, and for the costs. And so I think that now we have really to rethink everything, looking at a more independent intention to frequent museums, and not only related to an obligation you have since you are in that place that day. This is what I think.
A question has come in specifically for you from Francesco Fanelli. Will the new rules on reopening have an impact on ticket prices as visitor numbers will be reduced? Will you have to increase prices, and by how much?
No increasing and no reduction. Of course, all the gratuities are confirmed. No needless to say that the cost of Raffaele were huge, and the incomes we can expect are immensely disappointing. So this has nothing to see with making money. But of course, we never had consider the idea of increasing the price. And we will see, of course, after them. Now we have a show which was conceived in another world. The next shows we will try to conceive, in comparison to the new conditions, to be more also effective.
And Xavier Bray, about the business model, what are your thoughts?
I think when Richard Wallace gave his collection to the British nation, he really entrusted the collection to this government. So echoing what Gabriele was saying, it is very much the government that should come up with a recovery plan, very much like the German museum system, at least to put us back on our feet. I think this sort of hybrid way of financing ourselves with government help and the commercial has hit a big barrier, and we are going to be in a very difficult position to get back to where we were. So if the government could really think hard about using the museums, as I said earlier, as a way of demonstrating that our society is coming back to some kind of normality, that museums are open for the well-being of the British nation, the better. We will have to be as inventive as possible. We have to be quite dependent on our donors, our patrons, people who will, who believe in what we do and the work we do, who will really do their best to help us financially and fill the gaps of our massive deficits that we are going to be facing for this financial year. So we are very nervous. There's no doubt about it. But we believe that our job is to keep these museums open, to make them accessible to all, and we will carry on doing that. That is our mission. That's why Gabriele and I took on these jobs to really take these museums forwards.
Of course, so you're mentioning private sponsor. That's another big challenge going forward, because the pandemic is coinciding, obviously, or leading to rather a recession, which companies are definitely cutting expenses, and so that would be a challenge. But that's another subject. There's a question that came in for Roberta Cremoncini from Cristina Paganini. Small private museums are under particular economic pressure due to lack of funding. Are there any thoughts? What do you think should be done to support them in particular?
Well, obviously, we're extremely small, but in a sense, we've been very taken aback in the sense of how much support we received. We have a small membership and everybody has been even small donation by they keep on coming in all the time. So that's very it's very nice. It's not going to change completely our going forward, because obviously there are costs of sustaining this period of closure they're very immense. But it is that is quite encouraging, and also it is because we are as a small foundation and we have an endowment. We are lucky that we can we have a core of survival, and in a sense is we are nimble enough to move and to readjust, maybe better in the sense that I keep it as a positive, larger than a bigger museum where they have bigger costs and also bigger donations or bigger sponsorship and things. So in a sense, I will take this as a first step to go back to our core, and we have the permanent collection, which is for us is always the starting point. We don't have a huge exhibitions. Also we always base from what we have and the collection we have. So it's in a sense as maybe it's proven the fact that actually being smaller actually it can be more long.
A question has come in from Emma Bassett from Venice in Peril, saying, as a UK conservation charity that funds projects in Venice, we are waiting eagerly for conservation studios, restoration studios to open up and work to restart. Is there anything happening in the museums that you lead on that front, on the conservation front?
One of the difficulties that have been that we've all experienced during the pandemic is that our museums are closed. So there is actually no activity going on in the museums. So our conservation staff have been essentially writing their reports and working on their articles and so on. Our chief restorer has been coming in just to ensure that everything is in good order in the gallery. But of course, you know, because it's not been possible to be on site because we're all still in lockdown, you know, little work of that kind of practical nature has been happening. So we're all very keen for, you know, those whose work depends on being in the building. We're very keen on them being able to come back. It will have to happen safely and so on. But we're very keen that that kind of work can start again. So. You know, and I'm sure there are a lot of conservators up and down the country who are, you know, desperately keen to get back to restoration work, whether they work in museums or in the private context.
Xavier, Bray, when will conservation activities start again? Or
very similarly to Gabriele, we haven't been able to bring our conservators back to the Wallace. We were, you know, before we closed, we were restoring all our arms and armor, our moguls arms and armor, and that's had to come to a stop. Our head of collection care is likewise coming in to make sure that everything's okay from an environment point of view, and whether the moths are there or not. So there are lots of practicalities like that, of just housekeeping, just to make sure the museum is well looked after. And indeed, it's I don't know about Gabriele, but it's almost been as much work as it is when we're open. Just keeping the place closed but safe is, of course, the priority, and make sure the collection is happy. When I go and do my rounds, I do feel like Richard Wallace inspecting his his collection and such. But
that must be a nice feeling.
but like him, he just can't wait to share it with everybody else. It's pretty miserable to look at the Rubens on your own without being able to tell anybody else about it. So of course, that's something we're very hopeful to be able to do soon.
I wanted to ask, we looking ahead, obviously museums, as we mentioned, are opening in Italy today. They've already opened in Germany and other countries. Do you think people will be eager to go back to life as before, or do you think that there will be a residual fear that people will be scared of being in, if not crowded, but certainly in public spaces? Do you think it will take a long time to get back to normal? Anyone who wants to take it up?
Okay, can I reply for Italy? I do not know. I mean, I'm sure in the next few weeks it will be a big response of the audience, because it's almost natural. But we have to see, and it's also, I mean, we have to see also how people, also the responsibility of the audience, what it will be, because of course we need now the support of their attention, and we have to see if this is really working. We are opening today only archaeological sites and open parks. From tomorrow, a few museums, but in the next few days, in a sparse way, a big museum will be opening. And for example, the Vatican museums, which is not Italy, but of course is a problem that we share in the same place. And they have immense, of course, problems of reorganizations. But we want to see what is really the engagement and the commitment of the audience in relation to the support of the collection and museums, and it has to be proved in the next few days.
What do you think? Anyone else want to Yeah, I'd like to come in on that if I may.
Response, yes.
There is a big question: what happens with tourism? Matteo raised the question of tourist visiting, and how tourist visiting to museum is something that's kind of under the spotlight at the moment. Our museums are visitor attractions as well. Our museums are places that act as a magnet for tourism to those particular cities, whether it's London, Naples, Milan, or Paris. So part of the attraction is visiting the museum. I suspect until the audiences return, the tourist audiences, we'll be working very much more with our local audiences, and that's probably a good thing. I think it's probably true that in some places we've lost sight of the local audiences. So we'll be looking more to work with our local audiences. We'll be looking more to work with our own permanent collections. I think the connection between our exhibition programs and our permanent collections will be much tighter, will be closer. And then gradually, I think as the tourist visiting returns, we'll have developed new ways of speaking to our varied publics, thinking about how we present our collections and our exhibitions. In some ways, it's a fascinating opportunity to rethink our commitment to visitors, to audiences, and to the public in general.
I suppose, can I just add, I think the main thing is going to be to earn the confidence of our public. I mean, there's tourism on one side, but there's also the fact that our museums are great meeting places where people can, find themselves not only with work of art, but with their friends. And I think as we go forwards, as we little by little provide the right kind of atmosphere for social distancing, there's big debate of how can we reopen the cafe? Can we reopen the cafe with social distancing? Every time I go to Pret-a-Manger, I watch how people behave. Do we need to set up a sort of bar system where people can stand and have their espressos like in Italy? So there will be lots of experimentation, but I think it's going to be very much baby steps. And as Gabriele says, very much working with the local sort of community to try and get them to come and use their museum, get them to reappreciate the museum that they have at their doorstep. Sometimes we all suffer from this. We tend to travel miles to go and see something, but have not been to our local museum for a very long time. And where we are, Wallace Collection is the middle of Marylebone. It's central London, but we have a good sort of sphere of influence, let's say, in this area, and we very much hope to work with local audiences.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we're at the end of our allotted time, but I think that's a wonderful note to end on. The more local re-engagement with our museum as a good, as a sort of silver lining to this crisis. I wanted to thank our invisible audience for their participation and to apologize for all the many questions that we were not able to answer. And then thank the Italian Embassy and the Italian Ambassador for organizing the event. And of course, thank our 5 eminent panelists for their invaluable insights. And I would like to go over to the Italian Ambassador for a final word and goodbye. Thank you, Ambassador.
Yes, well, thank you, Nicole, and thank you all the panelists for the very stimulating, very interesting debate discussions that we have had. I want to thank everybody else, people who have joined us in the range of 300 people actually have been joining us, have been following this webinar. Many issues have been raised, many also difficulties, problems, but also new ways that will stay with us. But ultimately, I think that all our panelists agreed on one thing, that these new ways will definitely stay there, will definitely complement what we already we have done so far, and that we want keep on doing in the future, which is going to museums, because nothing can replace the actual experience, the pleasure of being in front of a painting or in the statue or anything that gives us that special connection with art. And I'm sure that very soon we will go back to that experience, taking, of course, with us what we have learned in this very strange and difficult times. So thank you again, all of you. And as I say, this is only the beginning of a series of events of the Italy Restart program. So I invite everybody to follow us also on the other events that we'll be organizing in the next few days and few weeks. So thank you and have a good day, all of you.